Well, if you look at the global footprint, ASML is already abroad. So they have a very simple strategy, actually. It's just follow the customer. So anywhere TSMC, Samsung, Intel, or SK Hynix decides to build a chip fab, this whole ecosystem, not only ASML, but also AMED, KLA, or TEL, they have to, and all the, the consumables, they have to move or expand in these areas. And that's the reason why there are not too many of these semiconductor hubs around the world, because it's crazy expensive to replicate all these ecosystems.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Leaders, and today we are joined by Marc Hijink, financial journalist, technology columnist and author of Focus, the ASML Way. He is here to discuss that, the history of ASML, where they stand today and the semiconductor industry as a whole. ASML at the time of recording is the 26th biggest public company in the world. So I'm certainly looking forward to hear all about this. I'm also joined by Jean-Paul, one of our analysts here at etoro as well. Marc, how are you doing first of all?
Oh, great. Yeah, kind of hectic because there's a lot of attention, for this industry and of course for ASML as well, and which makes life very interesting at this time. And of course, it's an ongoing topic. So while I finished the first edition of the book, I think it was late 23, I've kept on updating it so that there's now a new Dutch edition out, just being released. The English edition might be released as well, and there are like 7 translations. So for me, I never had expected that the book would be such a great story to tell. But it's mainly because ASML has this very crucial role in the entire semiconductor industry and actually in the entire technology stack.
Well, yeah, so it's great to discuss all of that. And also for those watching on YouTube, I'm pointing below. We'll put the links for the books in the bio,
Cool.
and obviously you're on the podcast. Do
Yeah.
check that out as well. Jean-Paul, great to have you with us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. And I'm so glad we have the opportunity to discuss ASML for a wide audience. I can still remember, Sam, the other day, I think some 2.5 years ago, when we met in London together with Jonny. And I mentioned ASML as a Dutch analyst, and he
Yes.
said, what company? It, Many people abroad, it always surprises me, haven't heard a lot about ASML for years. But right now, it's left, right, and center everywhere in the semiconductor industry, in the trade war scene. So I'm lucky to be able to discuss ASML with you, Mark.
Okay, well, Jean-Paul, to add on that, what I experienced when I was doing research for the book is that even in the Netherlands, ASML was quite unknown or quite an obscure name because, well, their technology is not really accessible for like a layman. But when I traveled to Taiwan, everybody knew what the company was about, what its role in the semiconductor fab was. It really was like, the famous Dutch football player Johan Cruyff.
Right.
Yeah, so everywhere you traveled around the world, everybody knew Johan Cruyff. And if you travel to any country that's like depending on semiconductor industry, like Taiwan or Korea, and then ASML is a well-known name. And for me, it was, yeah, kind of a surprise.
What a football player he was, by the way.
Yeah,
I-
yeah, definitely. I've
yeah.
seen him play though.
Oh,
Yeah,
have
yeah,
you?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
The
Yeah.
first football skill I ever learned was the Cruyff turn, um,
Oh,
which is
okay.
a very famous one, of
Well,
course.
give us a demonstration.
Maybe another time, maybe another time. But I mean, it's interesting. JP, you mentioned that not many people were aware of this company. Now, as of recording, we're doing this on the 16th of October. It's 26th biggest company in the world. But Marc, how did you sort of first come about to hearing about this company? And also, it's fair to say that companies are generally not that eager to let journalists get too close. So especially when we talk about it for an extended period. So how did you sort of earn their trust to be allowed such close access?
Um, I think it all went quite gradually. I just looked it up actually in the archives of NRC, the newspaper I work for, and I think the first story I wrote about ASML was back in 2011 when the company was still, well, not as big as it is now, with a lot less revenue, and it wasn't a very clear technology leader back then, because EUV, the most advanced technology they have in this lithography tool, was not working at that time. So that was 2011. And back in 2013, I did an interview and a tour around Veldhoven, a very small town in, well, a very small country, the Netherlands. And they showed me their new technology. And I also spoke to back then, the CFO, Peter Wenning. And Peter was, to the outside world, he seemed like the CEO already. But he was really determining for ASML's role in the outside world, while on the inside, there was this other guy, the CTO, Martin van der Brink, who I first met in 2015. And he's kind of an awkward guy, so to speak, very challenging, but he's also a brilliant mind. And for me, I experienced that to get into the circle of trust of engineers, you have to dive into technology and understand what they're fascinated in. So what drives them to spend day in, day out in getting the physics or the chemistry or the mechatronics of these very complex machines in such a way that they can actually operate 24/7 in a chip fab on the other side of the world. So you have to be a bit crazy to be at ASML and to dive into this very complex technology. But it's something that really is in their core. So I did a lot of speed courses, to be honest, and people at ASML are usually very enthusiastic about what drives them and telling about them. So I spent lots of times asking them to explain to me how this machine is working, what their challenges are, what difficulties they have to conquer, and how they how they're organized, which is kind of chaotic. If you read the book, from the outside, ASML seems this very well defined, sleek, well-oiled machine of innovation, but on the inside it's quite chaotic. And so I experienced this as a journalist, and back in 21, during COVID, I saw an opportunity. Well, usually traveled around the world to write about big tech, which is usually American companies. And during COVID, I couldn't travel, so I decided I should write some stories about the Dutch big tech, which is not consumer technology. That's the reason why we don't know these, why ASML is not a household name. But I asked them, is it okay if I spend like a year on background in the company, have regular conversations with your leadership, how you're handling all these supply chain issues, the chip shortages, and the result was like a long read in NRC, and then book publisher tapped me on the shoulder, said, "Hey, isn't there a book on it?" So I went back to ASML and said, "Okay, I think there's a great story," because I got a chance to get to know Peter and Martin, to see the connections between Zeiss, the German supplier of the optics system, and ASML, their cultural differences. I realized that ASML was really like the spider in the web of the entire semiconductor industry, which was interesting because the whole world was craving for semicon back then. And also, it was the fact that ASML was like discovered by general media, and because it was in the middle of these geopolitical turmoil in 21. And So all these elements came together uh, in the book. And ASML, well, they knew me for about like 10 or 15 years. And it's really in this industry about bond of trust. That's also how the semiconductor suppliers and or the equipment suppliers and the customers cooperate, and even their suppliers, because these are huge investments. The capex investments are massive if you want to build a fab or get a fab running. So you have to trust each other, and these are personal relationships. And I guess that helped me, um, well, convince ASML to let me into the company for another 2 years and travel around the world, see their their local fabs or research labs, and also visit their suppliers and customers, so that I could create a holistic view of the company. And well, it was a long journey, and the book was actually very well aligned with the two departing co-presidents, which are like the main characters in the book, Peter Wenning and Martin van der Brink. So all things aligned, and that's the end result is focus.
Incredible. Organized chaos, it sounds like at the beginning of all of that. When did you realize,
Yeah.
you know what, this is a special company? Was it early on, or did it take time to get to that point where you're like, "Right, this is a serious operation here"?
Um, I think you have to dive into ASML to experience what's so special about this company. And I think I also learned from doing research, even though I had followed the company and or covered the company for about 10 years from a newspaper, doing research and having over like 300 interviews with people inside ASML and outside ASML. It really struck me that there's a lot of emphasis on building these very complex machines, like copiers of practically every semiconductor in the devices we use every day. But it's also a very strategic thinking company. So looking back, you see a lot of takeovers or partnerships that were really crucial for the company to survive or to get its technology running in such a way that its customers would actually buy these machines. So these EUV machines that are so important. You've seen the last quarter's results. EUV is like a huge area for growth for ASML, and it took them like 15 years to get it running, and they weren't so sure that they would be able to get it running. Okay, it worked in a lab, it worked as a prototype, but to have an EUV machine actually create value for a customer, you need it to be running more than 100 wafers per hour. And in fact, it has been approved now over 200 wafers per hour. So throughput is very important. And that takes a lot of time and also a lot of cooperation with its customers. So you see this close relationship between, for example, the biggest customer, which is TSMC and ASML. They tweak the machine together because the first the first prototype usually doesn't work or doesn't work perfectly. It's just good enough to start
Yeah.
tweaking and experimenting and getting it up to this level of high yield, so not too many wrong chips that you have to throw away, and to a high throughput, so that it can be viable in a high volume production. And that's the moment in time when the TSMC actually starts making money. And that's a journey they take together, these engineers. So that's a quite a special relationship. It's not your ordinary customer-supplier relationship.
Fantastic. I mean, you mentioned TSMC there, and of course the earnings. So JP will come to you on that in a moment. Of course, they just released ASML, so we'll discuss that in a moment. Mark, on ASML's culture, what was that like, and how important do you think that is, to their success that they've had?
Well, you could argue their culture is actually their biggest moat.
Mm.
So if you look at the lithography tool, it's mainly like your office copier. So it replicates a blueprint of a chip at a rapid pace, 24/7. And it's complex because it has all these dimensions of physics. It's working on the nanometer scale accuracy. It also has chemistry. It has a lot of optics and also mechatronics. And a lot of software, as we've seen. So to keep it all together, you need this multitude of skills, and it's a certain engineering spirit, and it also forces you to think about the problem you're going to solve might cause another problem in another corner of the machine for somebody else. So you have it's like a meta problem, and ASML was capable of creating an organization and organizing its massive amounts of engineers in such a way that they are able to fix these problems that are really hard to comprehend if you don't zoom out.
Mm.
And you also have to be very fast in iterating and changing and adapting to new situations. So these engineers, well, I describe them from the outside like a beehive. So it's very hard to to see how things are actually running, but it's running. And everybody knows what's going on, and it's like parallel compute. And for that to be successful, you need a certain mindset. So the Dutch mindset is usually very direct. Sam, what's your nationality, by the way?
British.
British. Okay. Well, the British can be pretty direct as well. You usually throw in a bit of humor as well.
Yes.
I guess that's the reason why we get along. But if you compare, for example, companies like ASML with Zeiss, which is German, there's a lot more hierarchy and there's a lot more distance. But if you want to solve problems quickly, you have to delete any latency or politeness is latency, or being too careful with each other or hiding your problems. So you really have to be open about your problems. So ASML has this direct, blunt Dutch way of cooperating and challenging each other, which is kind of hectic. So even for me as a Dutch person, I think it's not average, but that's also because its main technology, the roadmap was always. Let me rephrase that. So its main visioneer, is that a pioneer? Is that a word? Visioneer?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Pioneer.
Pioneer. So ASML's pioneer, technology pioneer, was Martin van der Brink, and he still is an advisor to the company. And Martin has this very challenging way, direct way of, well, confronting you with your weaknesses or your failures. He's just pointing you, just pushing your buttons to see how you respond. And this is a very direct way of for example, having meetings. And he likes to create like this chaos. A bit of chaos helps spur creativity. Well, that's not an environment a lot of other cultures feel themselves at home, so or comfortable. It takes a certain attitude to be to realize that you're not the smartest one in the room, and it's not about ego. All the things Martin said were with his customers in mind. So he always figured out, okay, so what's in it for our customers? You can't be too happy with yourself. Say, oh, we were this successful company. We've created EV, the most complex machine in the world. We can conquer any challenge. So Martin was always about emphasizing being modest, or which is kind of counterintuitive because ASML people at ASML can also be very arrogant about the technology they
Yeah, yeah.
create as the only as the monopolist in this field. So there's a very dynamic engineering spirit, and it's all because there's a lot of pressure on the company because it's not only from the public but also from customers mainly because they're craving for new machines at the time they want it, and then they just pause their orders when they don't need it or they change their orders. So you really have to be flexible and agile, and the main reason for ASML to succeed in this very challenging field and gain market share from the other competitors like Nikon and Canon was that it in its early years it was the only company that didn't have any it was let me rephrase it. So back in the early days, ASML started out with nothing. It was like a spin-off of Philips, but it didn't have its own supply chain. It had to build and go out and find new suppliers, and especially the relationship with Zeiss is crucial, but also VDL, a Dutch company. And it took a while, but because ASML was able to spread the pain of the downturns of the in the chip industry throughout its supply chain, its ecosystem of a supply chain, it was able to bounce back earlier and faster than its competitors because Nikon and Canon are they're like conglomerates, and they build so they use their own lenses, and they have a lot of history and a lot of other products they also make, like cameras or digital copiers. But ASML was basically a one-trick pony. You could argue it still is. It builds other machines and it does a lot of metrology, but the end result is better lithography. So that's still the main goal. And their competitors were more distracted, and they cut their research budget, for example, during downturns. And ASML always kept that up, and that got them to this level, to this pivotal point. Okay, now we got the most market share, which means that we can grab more of the capex and spend more on R&D. And when you can out innovate your competitors, then you can really grab most market share, or even become a monopolist, as we've seen with the EUV.
Yeah, not a bad one-trick pony. And also, it's funny, you mentioned like the directness of Dutch people. One of my favorite footballers of all time, Dennis Bergkamp, his post-match interviews were very sort of blunt and to the point. Always used to make me laugh. But he was an incredible footballer.
Yeah. I love this playing. I've seen
Yeah.
him as well with Cruyff, actually.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah,
you're
that
making me
was,
jealous here.
no, it was like a memorial game, I guess, with the Dutch team. Everybody was like in their orange shirts, and I remember that. I think it was the game that Johan Cruyff actually broke his arm, and he kept on playing. But I think it was in his 50s already, so it
Oh,
was
okay.
like.
Yeah, no,
It's
incredible.
actually interesting, Mark, that you mention ASML's culture as perhaps the largest contribution to the moat they have.
Mm.
In your book, I particularly liked the visits that they paid to Zeiss in Germany,
Yeah.
which was also, I believe, some sort of a culture clash.
Oh,
But if you look
sorry.
at the recent management changes, with both Peter Wenning and Martin van der Brink leaving the company recently, what does that mean for ASML going forward? Is that culture preserved well enough?
Okay, let me just add on the mode thing, and then I'll answer your question. I think it's the biggest mode because, of course, there's a lot of potential competition coming from China, where ASML has been restricted to sell its most advanced machines. But building a competitor for a lithography tool takes this direct culture and this also this over dependence on suppliers. So there's a lot of single sourcing, which is a really a relationship companies don't want to be in because you're really betting the company on another player. But together with Zeiss, they have like this one business, two company attitude. And I think that also is the, well, you can trace that back to the, I call it the Rhinish model. So the countries in the along the river Rhine in Europe, they tend to have this long-term vision, and that makes it easier to cooperate and to create value in the long run, and which is completely opposite from the Anglo-Saxon way of doing business, which is, well, we have to have the next quarterly results up so our shareholders can benefit. So ASML built their ecosystem on this Rhinish model. There's a lot of sharing involved, and you can also see that in the profit margins. That would be very hard to replicate in a country like China, for example, where there's a different business culture and also a different mindset. Well, we're talking about directness, but also about sharing and trusting each other. So that's the reason why I call it this ASML's, well, moat as well, its culture and its background. Now, getting back to your question, Peter and Martin leaving is, of course, well, was inevitable because they're in their pensionate years. When you're turning 67, then it's then you get a pension in the Netherlands. Actually, they delayed their pension by 2 years because things were a bit too hectic 2 years ago, because it was right in the middle of all the geopolitical turmoil, and right in the middle of the well, ASML really having to well, beat its own records because there was so much demand for chip manufacturing machines, and ASML was also caught by its own problem that it created itself. It had a logistics center, and when they tried to use it, it didn't work. It was basically a heart attack, as I discovered, that tore down the whole company. So everybody had to pitch in during the semiconductor and the chip shortages. So there was really the worst timing you could get. So at that moment in time, Peter and Martin didn't want to leave. But it was already pretty clear that they had a successor in mind, which is Christophe Fouquet. And Christophe, he joined the company in 2008. He was handpicked by Martin, and back in 2007, he used to work for, so Christophe is French, but he used to work for KLA, one of ASML's peers in Silicon Valley, but he wanted to go back to Europe. And actually, Christophe started off at ASML at a, what's the right way to put that, in a lower position that he was actually hired for, because he wanted to be able to learn. And so I was referring to my speed courses when I was diving into ASML. I guess he wanted a speed course for himself, but it became pretty clear that he was regarded as a very well, as leadership potential, so to speak. And so when Christophe joined ASML, he also well, he bought a house in the vicinity of Veldhoven in the south of the Netherlands, and he is very much like a homegrown talent, and I think he's very close to Martin. They still are, and in the book I describe how this relationship well, kind of grew, and these were like two engineers with both this well, they have this creative idea of thinking about physics, and that's interesting. So there was like this natural match between them, between two engineers, and I think Christophe is like the let me put it another way. Peter and Martin were like opposites. They were like yin and yang. And I think Christophe is like more the balanced result of a mix of those two. And because Martin was not a diplomatic guy, he's not a guy you want in front of your audience telling shareholders to. That was Peter's job. And Christophe is like a marriage of the result of a mix of those. But you do see that he just appointed a new CTO, and I guess I think his name is Marco Peters,
Yeah.
and he also has a very long background within ASML, and I think it was like honoring Martin, because Martin was like employee number 0, and he was really the Steve Jobs of lithography for 4 decades. And when Martin stepped down, they didn't want to replace him immediately with another CTO because, well, he was such a crucial person for ASML and the entire industry that it wouldn't. Now, they waited for at least, I think, a year to appoint a new CTO. And now, of course, Christophe can focus more on strategy or getting ASML more robust in this, very hectic times, because it's hard to predict what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. JP, just quickly then, I mean, for those watching this or listening to this, it could be in a few days' time, but we're recording this the day after the earnings. What was your initial take on that from ASML? All good?
Yeah, it looks good. I think a lot of people were a bit puzzled with the numbers, but also here I think it's good to zoom out a little bit. So the good part, as I see it, if you look back, I've been following ASML also for, I don't know how many years, is that they reported the second best quarter in terms of the order book for EUV machines. That's what they invested a lot in. They had a peak moment. I think that's also what you just related to, Mark, in the fourth quarter of 2023, where they saw 5.6 billion euros coming in, and now it was at 3.6. And over the last 2 years, there was a little bit of doubt, with the problems at Samsung, with the problems at Intel, TSMC obviously being the king of the industry. But they've said numerous times, we like the EUV, we use it a lot, but we think these machines are so incredibly expensive. So now the order book filling up with EUV orders in a third quarter, usually the fourth quarter is the strongest. I think that is nothing less than a positive sign, and also the driver behind the development of the share price recently. And that obviously comes on the back of the AI race, where Nvidia, OpenAI, everyone wants to have more chips, right? Now, the other part is China. I was surprised actually yesterday to see China making up for 42% of ASML's revenues, which was more than the 20% that we had in mind. And Christophe Fouquet said very clearly, I'm positive about the trend in the industry, but I'm very hesitant to make a call on China. He believes that the sales to China will get lower in 2026, and that is a bit of a headwind. But all in all, positive.
Okay, well, it's interesting you mentioned China, because if you zoom out a bit further, then you see that China used to be 20% of ASML's market, and then it got a certain uptake because of, I guess it's also because of expansion plans, but also because of export controls, and they were buying more than they needed. So now you have this natural tendency to order less, and I think that's a trend you see happening not only at ASML but also at ASML's peers. So also U.S. companies that create semiconductor equipment. And the funny thing is, Chinese companies are very good at building their own technology now that can replicate the machines of Applied Materials or KLA or name them. And they have companies like AMEC and Nora that are replacing the equipment. Lithography is a different ball game. It's really hard. If you look at a chip fab, it's really like the oven in the bakery. So that's the crucial tool you need. And I think there's still a huge dependency on ASML when it comes to China. So when looking at the AI demand, it's going to be interesting to see if, well, for example, if there's going to be competition for TSMC, because there's such a shortage of production capacity. If you look at the insanely high prices for NVIDIA chips, it's also because there's no competition, because nobody else can get the manufacturing or the production lines at TSMC. I think if zooming out, there's a need for more competition. I'm not sure when this will happen, but I think that's Intel's game. That's also Samsung's well, aspiration. It's hope, so to speak. I don't know if they're managed. Okay, sorry, I don't hear you. Sam, can't hear you.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
I'll respond to the question and go again. Yeah, fascinating. And actually, just one more question on ASML as of right now before we go into the semiconductor industry, just to wrap things up.
Mhm.
Um, ASML is such an important company in a relatively small country, as we mentioned, like the Netherlands. Do you see them having to move abroad at some point, or no?
Well, if you look at the global footprint, ASML is already abroad. So they have a very simple strategy, actually. It's just follow the customer. So anywhere TSMC, Samsung, Intel, or SK Hynix decides to build a chip fab, this whole ecosystem, not only ASML, but also AMED, KLA, or TEL, they have to, and all the the consumables, they have to move or expand in these areas. And that's the reason why there are not too many of these semiconductor hubs around the world, because it's crazy expensive to replicate all these ecosystems. But you do see ASML rapid growth in Arizona, where TSMC is expanding, or in Austin, where Samsung is going to expand as well. Of course, in Taiwan and Korea. So you see ASML grow accordingly to the growth of their customers. Japan, I shouldn't leave out Japan. The core engineering and development of and design of the machine will always be in the Netherlands. So ASML is too big to move. So there was this tendency throughout the era of globalization in certain, for example, if you look at ASM International, one of the other chip machine makers in the Netherlands, well, they outsourced a lot, or they moved their production and research to Asia or to the US. But ASML's core is still in the Netherlands, and it's really built upon this European supply chain. So 80% of all the ingredients of like the hundreds of thousands of parts in such a massive litho tool, they come from Europe. So to be able to adjust and to adapt and to keep tweaking this production, you have to be close to your suppliers. And it's not easy to move or to replicate that. But
But
you do.
isn't it more the question, Mark? ASML is too big to move, but is the Netherlands big enough to host a growing ASML?
No, you see growth happening around the world. So every division or any office of ASML I visited is like expanding. So you see all these
Right.
cranes anywhere, everywhere around the world. So you see growth everywhere. But the Netherlands is, well, it's small. and we don't have a lot of infrastructure, so there's room now for improvement. And I think there's a subsidy plan called Beethoven, 2.5 billion euros. Not for ASML, because actually ASML is chiming in as well, but to support the infrastructure and the educational system for ASML to grow. And it might take a while, but ASML would never move its core, which is like building all these new machines that take engineers to cooperate closely together. I also described it in the book how, for example, that's Martin van den Brink's attitude. I think it's also his legacy that there's a need for people to be close. So we're speaking to each other through a webcam, which is nice, but it's always better if I can read your faces in a room. So that's Martin's theory. He really ingrained that in the company, that you should work together. So all these engineers are pretty close together. So it's like otherwise you add latency or you add confusion, because it's you want to see the direct response. It's also part of the Dutch culture. You want to have this direct response. You can be direct, but you also want to read the other person's reaction to it when you challenge him or her. And this is very much Martin's attitude, and I think that's part of the ASML DNA now. So that's the way the engineers cooperate. And for that culture to survive, you have to be close. If you're going to spread it out through all over the world, it will slow down the pace of innovation. And that's the reason why they will keep their core development and research at the center in the Netherlands. What you do see happening is, for example, that parts of their supply chain, so other suppliers like VDL or ProDrive or Newways, are expanding in Southeast Asia because it's cheaper, because they're closer to customers, and also expanding in the US because, well, the world is like bifurcating. It might not be decoupling, but you have to make sure that you can serve any region to keep these machines running, because it can be the smallest part, but if it's not available, then the machine stops and the customer get really angry. It's just like de-risking. So the supply chain is already de-risking, but it doesn't make sense to replicate the production of these litho tools all around the world. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Amazing. Right, look, last couple of questions. I'll ask this one first to Mark, and then JP, feel free to jump in at the end. I mean, OpenAI have invested 300 billion, is it, in Oracle, Nvidia, 100 billion OpenAI, and big tech capex exceeds 400 billion, primarily meant for AI infrastructure, I think it's fair to say. Mark, do you think it's sustainable? Where do you see all of this going?
Oh, forgot my crystal ball. Sorry. Well, I'm just amazed by the numbers, and I
Crazy.
think that's part of the marketing as well, because since January, people are not impressed anymore if any number is below $100 million. So you really need to look at the way things are financed, for example. And I'm kind of worried about this, moving around money or investments where it's very hard to pinpoint who's actually paying for it. And of course, the biggest question mark is, will it work? So will AI add so much to our daily lives or to our economy that we're willing to pay for it, or that there's a business model for it, that we'll see ads in ChatGPT, for example, like Google, and that will make so much money that OpenAI can actually afford all these investments it's doing now. So I think that's like the weak spot in this potential AI bubble. But that's mainly an analysis of the use case. If you zoom out and you see what AI can offer when it comes to productivity, I think there's a massive gain there for society or for our economy or defense, of course. But I'm not sure if it adds up to all the crazy investment. And of course, you need, if you look at the bottlenecks, so semicon is one of the bottlenecks, but the other bottleneck is power. So you need crazy amounts of power to keep these data centers running. I think that might be a wall we could hit.
We'll soon find out. JP, what do you reckon? Anything you would add to all of that?
Yeah, I think it's a very large question to say, will it all pay out? Will it all bring in returns, these hundreds of billions of dollars that are invested? But actually, if you look at it from, let's say, an ASML perspective, then it's not so difficult to see what's going on. ASML is behind TSMC. You mentioned it before. TSMC also had earnings actually this morning. And it's pretty clear that the US has a number one top strategic priority, and that is to be able to build these advanced chips at home. Yeah, so TSMC has already committed 165 billion US dollars to invest. This morning, they came in with 30% revenue growth, 39% net profit growth. Capex is going to be at least 40 billion in 2025, presumably going up next year. And TSMC is going to speed up the build of factories in the US. So these factories, they need chip machines, right? Now you mentioned it as well, Mark, that dependency on just TSMC, that is too thin for such a strategic priority. So one way or the other, either it's Samsung, either it's Intel, or they're going to make it another way. There need to be more independent factories, independent from TSMC, that also need machines. Yeah, and at the same time, TSMC is not going to let go of their Taiwan location, right? So in that sense, ASML is in a good position to take a significant part of the investments. What I found interesting is that TSMC said, of our capital expenditure, something like 70% goes to the advanced chips, but some 10 to 20% goes to advanced packaging, which is also getting more important. And ASML yesterday told us that they shipped their first advanced packaging machine as well. Yeah, so ASML is also broadening. So whether ultimately you and I will all have an AI assistant on our computer, ordering your food, Sam, or even a robot sitting next to you mowing your lane while you're working for eToro, I don't know. That remains to be seen. But in the short term, there's no lack of investments and the money is there. So for that part, it's looking good.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how this will play out. There's a huge emphasis on these highly advanced chips you need for AI compute. But if you see what actually feeds AI, it's data. So you need a lot of mainstream chips for that as well, to collect all the sensors and to send it, or use communication tools to send it to AI data centers. So it's not only advanced nodes that are gonna benefit from the AI uptake. And I think it's also interesting to see that litho is, for example, EUV is also now being used for building HBM, so the high bandwidth memory. So these ingredients, it's not only the logic part that needs very fine lines, but also the memory part. And of course, advanced packaging is like this new era and a new area that that ASML is exploring, because they see there's a interesting technology leap to make it seems less advanced because it's just packaging or just backend, but you see it entering the clean room as well. and which makes it interesting because it's like a crucial addition to the number of bits you can cram on the same surface. And ASML, well, litho in a historic way was also usually for his horizontal shrinking. So and now of course because of AI, you see a lot of uh, uh, extra bits growing in a third dimension, but they all need litho. So I think ASML doesn't see that as a threat, but as an opportunity. And getting into advanced packaging is one of the ways to find and try to grab market share there as well.
Yeah, interesting area. Another interesting area, Mark. You wrote an article, I think it was last week, for on in the NRC about Nexperia. And I have to say, I'm not clued up enough on this, but this is clearly a hot topic. So, what's it all about?
Well, Nexperia is kind of the opposite from ASML because well, ASML is highly advanced technology. It's a semiconductor machine maker. Uh, Nexperia is building like well, it manufactures literally 100 billion of chips a year. So that's like almost like 10% of the entire number of chips produced worldwide. But these are really cheap chips. So transistors, diodes, little power chips. I can actually show them. I have a demo here.
Yes.
They hardly, well, it's like pepper and salt. But these are like crucial standard elements you see in any uh, any electronic device. And Nexperia is a Dutch company, um, or at least it started out as a Dutch company, and was part of Philips. Then it got spun off to NXP, which was a semiconductor division. And at NXP, well, it didn't get much attention, but because the technology wasn't too fancy, they got it, but it was a good cash cow. Then they sold it back in 2017 to Chinese investors. Then it got sold again to a company called WingTech. And what happened was that WingTech was hit by export controls by the US, by the Bureau of Industry and Security, because it's a Chinese company and it also does, well, it has a wafer fab as well. So oh no, it was a supplier to Apple actually. And when WingTech was hit by these export controls, it was harder for Nexperia to get to U.S. customer or to European customers because, well, they don't want to be depending on a company that might be hit by export controls. That's well, it's adding too much risk, and so that hurt Nexperia. And what Wing was trying to do was use Nexperia money to keep one of his other companies afloat. And that's the time when he also started putting this his own people in the leadership positions, and these were not well equipped people. He was just trying to well do a coup or a putsch, so to say. And that's when last week we found out that the Dutch government was had prepared like this crazy way of intervening, which they used an old law from the 50s, which was really a Cold War era law, and they actually froze Nexperia, and they wanted to prevent that the company or the manufacturing was going to end up in China's hands, or production would be moved, for example. It was like a really like an emergency measure they had to take and to stop this Mr. Wing of WingTech from trying to use Nexperia money to serve to keep his other company afloat, and B, trying to make this company more Chinese than it was, because actually it was the intention of Nexperia to become more Dutch, more European. And so there was an intervention. It was historic because the Dutch are usually about free trade and very liberal, But in this case, they really thought, okay, even though these are like small, very cheap semiconductors, we need them. These are crucial. And just remember the chip shortage back in 21
Yeah.
and 22, where everybody was waiting for their cars, not because a very highly advanced chip was lacking, but just it could be like the very simple chip that was actually, well, the motor in your window going down, or
Yeah.
in your wipers. So the end result was Nexperia was frozen, and the other board members stepped up and they asked the judge to intervene, and they actually, well, they pushed out the owner, Mr. Wing, and for it was a shock for Wing, but also a shock for a lot of other entrepreneurs in the Netherlands, that the Dutch government could actually intervene in such a way. But it shows that semiconductors are considered strategic now, and that the Dutch government is very well aware of that fact. So when ASML was hit by export controls, the Dutch government was actually a bit of surprise, because they didn't realize what kind of company was living in their own backyard. And of course, things have changed now. Everybody's aware how important chips are also for Europe.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things coming together here on Nexperia, which I must say I'm a little bit worried about. You mentioned in the beginning that when you travel to Asia, Mark, that you were surprised that everyone knew ASML already. I had that this weekend when you broke the story here in the Netherlands, but my timeline was immediately full of comments from Asia. WeChat, for example, in China was talking about Xperia all over the place. Whilst in the Netherlands, it took a couple of days before people were aware what a big thing this was. But yeah, definitely it is a very big thing in China. Also as some sort of a bargaining tool because of these supply chains, Nexperia is important. ASML has 80% of the supply chain, I should say, catered in Europe, but they're still dependent on some suppliers in Asia as well. And with this entire trade war going on, well, let's see how this will go. And let's hopefully both ASML and TSMC actually over the past 2 days guided to say, we can't tell you more about 2026, but come back in January and we'll tell you more. So it's going to be an exciting 3 months ahead, Sam, for this trade war to develop.
Definitely.
Yeah, it is. Well, it sounds like they don't have a crystal ball either. Unfortunately, none of us do. But look, Mark, JP, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you both on. As I mentioned earlier, the links are in the bio for the book and LinkedIn places and all of that kind of stuff. So, Mark, first of all, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Sam, and JP as well.
Thank you, JP.
Thank you, Sam.
Take care, everyone, and see you soon.